So, understanding students with ADHD. Let's just start with our basic facts. So, ADHD, the Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, the CDC recognized common signs and symptoms, and those include difficulty paying attention. So, those are going to be your kids that you see staring off into space, your daydreamers. They're not going to be focused on the lesson 100% every day. Difficulty controlling impulsive behaviors. So they're going to think of the one thing that they want to do and they're going to do it. If they want to throw one of the recess balls over the fence, they're going to do it. They're not going to think, well, then I won't have that, or then no one else will get to play with that. That's just, I want to do that, so I'm just going to do it. They don't have that. They don't stop and think of the consequences or try and make better decisions. And those are your kids that are also overly active. Your fidgeters, your squirmers, your kids that are always up, walking around. They can't seem to stay in their seat or sit still. The CDC saw 2 treatments. 2 common ones are behavior therapy and medication. They did mention that they seem to have the best results if the combination of the two. A student receives a combination of the two rather than one or the other. But again, that just goes with, it's a child-by-child basis. Doctors recommended. So some basic statistics. There was a 2016 NSCH parent survey. And it was sent out, parents filled it out for children diagnosed with ADHD. These survey results concluded that 6.1 million children between the ages of 2 and 17 have been diagnosed with ADHD. 6.1 million. It also found that boys are more likely to be diagnosed than girls, so the number of boys is a higher number, and that 6 in 10 children diagnosed with ADHD also have at least one other mental, emotional, behavioral disorder. So the 2 common ones, anxiety, depression. So not only do they have ADHD, they're pretty likely to have another disorder to go along with that. This same survey that was sent out in 2014 was for children ages 4 to 17, and it found that 9 out of 10 had received school support, which I found this number really surprising though. 9 out of 10, that's pretty good. Receive school support considering how difficult it is for these students to be qualified to receive support in these special education classrooms and to get them the accommodations they need. It also found that 6 out of 10 receive behavioral treatment or skills training on top, with that school support. The number of ADHD cases are on the rise, and the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association had a study, and their results found that there was an increase greater than 30% of the number of children diagnosed between 2010 and 2017. Now, they only did count the number of children that are commercially insured. So your children that are not insured or are privately insured were not taken account into this study. But an increase of 30%. So in 2010, 4.8% of all doctor diagnoses were ADHD diagnoses. And in 2017, that number increased to 6.4%. Overall, this was an increase of 31%. So as you can see, the numbers are quite high. And they do have some theories as to why that's occurring. So, the first one, environmental factors. a lot of this comes down to your prenatal exposure. It's not really so much after they've been born exposure later in life, but as they're developing. And so one of your main ones, tobacco products. So your mothers, other parents that have been smoking, alcohol, lead, pesticides, PVC, PCBs, and there are also some medications that they found that they think have led to the increase of ADHD diagnosis. They also say that the greater public and professional awareness has increased the numbers, which makes sense, as the more people that are aware of the signs, the symptoms of ADHD, the more likely children that show those signs are going to be diagnosed. The parents, teachers, faculty, their doctors, a lot more of those people are being educated on ADHD and what to look for. So then it's being caught so that they can be diagnosed and get the treatment that they need to help them. They also mention sleep deprivation. So not getting enough sleep, staying up late, and blue light emitting devices. So your screen time. So being on your computers, your cell phones, your TVs, your tablets, all these things that you think can be used educationally, they think might have helped to raise the number of ADHD diagnoses. ADHD in schools. For the most part, ADHD does not help a child be successful, to put it lightly. Most of the time, these are your children that have lower grades, mainly because they either aren't turning in their assignments, they're not listening to the directions. So a lot of your times, your ADHD is not going to help your school-aged children. So your first sign, inattention. This can lead to missing details in assignments, missing due dates for assignments. So then that's going to affect their grades. Because most of the time, they're going to be daydreaming, staring off into space. They're not listening as clearly as they should be, and they're not catching those important details. They can also have difficulty organizing their assignments. So they could just lose it. Another sign is your hyperactivity. So being up, moving, fidgeting, talking. So this can lead to verbal and physical disruptions that can get them removed from the class if severe enough. But your disruptions, not only is it going to affect their learning, but it's also going to affect the rest of the class. Because most likely the teacher is going to have to stop the lesson to get everything back on track. So during this time, learning has stopped for everyone, not just the student with ADHD. And your third symptom, impulsivity. They're going to make careless errors. They might, multiple choice test, they might just see the first one that they think's right. Instead of reading through all of the options, they're going to see one, and they're going to be like, that's it. And they're not going to read through the rest of the options. So it's going to, again, affect their grades. Not thinking through answers. This can be, on worksheets and tests, but also just in discussions. Raising your hand, saying the first thing that came to your mind, instead of thinking it through, maybe coming up with a better answer. Maybe their answer's not wrong, but it's not the best. And this can also lead to them not attending all activities, not taking part in activities that they don't find interesting. If they don't find it interesting, they don't want to do it. That's that impulsivity. But when you keep this in mind, that not all students with ADHD are the same. So not only do they have their broad diagnosis of ADHD, then they can also fall into one of three groups. And that's inattentive, hyperactive, impulsive, or then they can fall into a combination of the two. So if they're in the inattentive, they're going to make careless mistakes. They're going to be your daydreamers. The ones that aren't finishing their work, don't turn it in on time. If you're hyperactive, impulsive, those are your fidgeters, your squirmers in their seats, the ones that are up moving, the ones that talk to their neighbor all the time, the ones that blurt out answers. Or then you have a combination, and they'll have a combination of both of those. So they might be a daydreamer that talks a lot to their neighbor. Gender can also play a role. Girls have more subtle symptoms, which is also one of the reasons why they're not diagnosed as early as boys. And age can. They mention that the older children have a higher ability to self-regulate. This, you could compare it between seniors in high school to kindergartners. The seniors in high school are probably going to have a higher ability to regulate their symptoms. But I also found it interesting that they mentioned it just within the kids of the grade. Your kids that were born at the beginning of the school year versus your kids that were born at the end. Those born in August and September are more likely to be able to regulate versus those younger kids in their grade. Maybe the ones born in March and April. According to IDEA 2004, ADHD falls into the other health impaired category. This is why I mentioned I found it surprising how many kids were reported to receive services from that survey. So that means they don't automatically get those services, the IEP. However, they can meet these three conditions. So documented problem, being referred for an evaluation, and then completing the evaluation and being able to see that need. So there is a way that they can, and if they don't meet one of these conditions, they can go back and reevaluate. But it's a lot longer process to get an IEP rather than your more traditional learning disabilities. So there are some effective class-wide interventions. These are not just for your students with ADHD. You can implement these throughout the class. So if you'll look at the site, it had a lot of good ones, and there were some though that I found that were more geared just for your ADHD students, and I wanted to find the ones that you can implement for everyone. So one of them that they recommended was having students repeat your directions. So your daydreamers, the ones that aren't catching those details, having the students repeat back the directions to you, or have them with their partner, the person they sit beside. What are the directions? What do I need to include? That way you know they caught those details. Color-coded folders. We mentioned that their organizational skills probably aren't the best, which your elementary age students, they probably aren't the best anyways. So they found color-coded folders for each subject. So putting all your math worksheets in a red folder, putting all your English worksheets in a yellow folder, science, green. And this you can implement within the whole class. You can say at the beginning of the year, you need a folder for this subject, it needs to be this color. Or you could provide them if you have the ability to. Another thing they mentioned was partner reading. And they mentioned this because traditional worksheets are your drill practice is very repetitive, which is not going to help your ADHD students. So they mentioned partner reading. So reading, that can be if you have a book that they're reading, a text, read it back and forth between your partner. If you're studying spelling words, or if you have them discuss their long answers, have them that person to talk with can really help. And they also mentioned a prevention as choices reward. So giving choices within their assignments can really help